Advocates and attorneys will go to the State House later this month to send a message about funding for legal aid in civil cases. To tell us why the funding matters and who's affected is our guest, the Executive Director of the Mass Legal Assistance Corporation, Lonnie Powers. Thank you very much for being with us, Lonnie.
Thank you, Chris, for having me.
First of all, talk about the kind of people you're helping here and what kinds of cases.
We help people in civil cases, that is, non-criminal cases. Many of our cases involve domestic violence, housing and homelessness, employment and unemployment for people. But we represent families of four, for example, who have incomes of $30,000 a year or less. That reaches people who are getting $577 a week to support a family of four. Even among those people, and even among the number of those people who have a legal problem and come to see legal aid, we have to turn away 64% because we don't have enough resources to represent them.
Now, you might think in times like this, when we keep hearing about the robust economic recovery, yes, it's easier to get money from the state maybe, but do we need as much legal aid as we did before?
We do. We've not ever been able to entirely meet the need, and as I said, we turn away 64% of the people who are financially eligible, who have a problem that we could help them with, but we don't have the resources to help them. And these are people, for example, there was a couple who lived in an apartment building that was foreclosed on during the depths of the economic crisis. The building then reverted to the bank. Over the course of several years, nobody did repairs on the building. Every winter, because the apartments on the first floor weren't winterized, our clients on the second floor had their pipes freeze up. This went on for several years, despite efforts of the local housing authority or housing and health authority to get the bank to do something about the conditions, until our clients did what they have a legal right to do, which was withhold rent until the conditions got fixed. That got the attention of the bank. They tried to foreclose on the clients and throw them out. Through the intervention of legal aid, our clients are able to stay in the apartment, get the conditions fixed, and continue to pay rent for an apartment that was decent to live in.
You mentioned domestic violence, and we know if people are victimized that way, they need help from the criminal justice system. But what is it about civil representation that's so important for these people?
Well, under Massachusetts law, if you are a victim of domestic violence, you have a right to get a restraining order, as it's called, against the person who has been violent toward you. But they have a right to object to that restraining order. We often, and then there are lots of ancillary legal problems that come up. One client who lived, I think, in Framingham comes to mind. Sylvia, I believe her name was. She was abused emotionally and physically for years by her ex-husband. She got a restraining order through the intervention of legal aid. He continued to stalk her and harass her. He went so far as to put a GPS device on her car so he could track her. Eventually, things were so bad that the court awarded sole physical custody of the children of the marriage to the wife, and the program was able to persuade the man to stay away from her. They also helped her secure decent housing and get employment training so she could get back in the workforce. So she now has a stable environment for her children and herself.
You know, we think of this kind of work as an expense for the taxpayers, but on the other hand, you're bringing in money for people. How important is that?
Well, it's quite important. It's important for the individuals. There was, as I think I've talked to you about before, a study done by the Boston Bar Association through a statewide task force that came out last year. And there were 3 independent economists who looked at the benefits of providing legal assistance to low-income people. And they found that for every dollar contributed by the state or invested by the state in legal aid, that somewhere between $2 and $5 comes back to the Commonwealth or to individuals in economic benefits. As I mentioned, the domestic violence case, that person, every time we save someone like that from further violence, there are medical costs that are saved, there's the cost of the police having to respond, and certainly there are the economic benefits to the individual and to the Commonwealth of having that person employed, having them stable, having their children educated as they should be. That benefits all of us, both economically and socially.
Well, in more recent times, you've gotten a bit of a budget increase from the state, a modest increase, but I guess the message you're sending is that you need a lot more.
Yes, going back to the Boston Bar report, that independent group recommended that the Commonwealth actually increase funding for civil legal aid by $30 million, and that they do so by increasing funding $10 million a year for 3 years. Last year we asked for a $10 million increase and we got $2 million. This year we still need the $10 million increase, and that's what we've requested from the legislature, and that's why we are holding, as you mentioned before, the Walk to the Hill for Legal Services on the 28th of January, where we anticipate somewhere over 500 lawyers will be at the State House to talk to their representatives and senators to urge them to support civil legal aid.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Lonnie Powers from the Mass Legal Assistance Corporation. We'll have more news in just a moment.